Have you ever felt like your children are starting to ignore you, or worse, that they no longer respect you? You raised them with love and care, yet now you're left wondering, where did I go wrong? It hurts, doesn't it? But let me tell you something important. Reacting with anger or falling into sadness won't solve the problem. Instead, there are wise steps you can take to regain peace, dignity, and even respect, all without creating conflict. In today's video, I share 8 powerful actions that can help you turn things around. These are not just theories but proven, thoughtful approaches that many elderly parents have used to repair broken relationships. Stay with me until the end because the last insight is the most important. It will truly transform how your children see you and how you see yourself. Before we begin, I would appreciate it if you like this video, you can help me continue to spread the old age lesson. If you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. If you like this video, please comment number 1. If you don't like it, comment number 0 to let me know, so I can make a better video for you. Now let's get started. Insight number 1. Don't react in anger. When we feel disrespected by the very people we raised, the pain cuts deep. As parents, we dedicate our lives to nurturing, guiding, and sacrificing for our children. So when they grow distant or behave in ways that seem ungrateful, it's natural to feel hurt. In moments like these, frustration can quickly turn into anger, and the urge to lash out can be overwhelming. Thoughts like, "How could you treat me like this after everything I've done for you?" Or "Do you even appreciate the sacrifices I made?" may rush to the surface. But before emotions take over, take a step back. Acting on anger rarely leads to resolution. More often than not, it widens the gap between you and your children. Anger can push them further away, making them feel defensive instead of open to understanding. Instead of reacting impulsively, take a moment to pause and reflect. Allow yourself the space to process your emotions before you respond. Consider the story of Mr. Tanaka, a retired schoolteacher in his 70s. He spent his entire career shaping young minds and teaching generations of students with patience and dedication. At home, he worked tirelessly to provide for his family, ensuring that his children had every opportunity to succeed. However, as they grew older and started their own lives, their visits became less frequent. The warm, lively conversations they once shared were now replaced with brief, distracted exchanges. One evening, after yet another unanswered phone call, Mr. Tanaka felt frustration boiling inside him. He gripped his phone, ready to send a harsh message to his son. He wanted to demand, "Do you even care about me anymore?" But something held him back. Instead of giving in to his anger, he placed the phone down and decided to go for a quiet walk in the park near his home. As he strolled along the familiar paths, the cool evening air calming his nerves, memories flooded his mind. He thought about the years he spent standing in front of a classroom, shaping young lives, and the pride he felt watching his students grow. He remembered the late nights spent helping his children with homework, the joy of seeing their small victories, and the laughter they once shared around the dinner table. He realized that his worth was not determined by how often his children called or visited. His value came from the life he had built, the wisdom he had shared, and the kindness he had shown, not just to his children but to countless others. That moment of quiet reflection changed everything. He no longer felt consumed by resentment. Instead, he felt a renewed sense of peace. He decided that rather than letting anger drive his actions, he would approach his relationships with patience, grace, and understanding. This story holds an important lesson. Emotional reactions, especially those rooted in anger, rarely lead to positive outcomes. When you lash out, you don't gain respect. You risk losing it. A heated response may feel justified at the moment, but it often causes deeper wounds, making it harder to mend relationships later. Instead, the next time you feel disrespected or hurt by your children's actions, pause. Take a deep breath. Give yourself time to process your emotions without letting them control you. Remind yourself of your worth. It is not defined by how others treat you but by the life you have lived and the person you continue to be. By approaching the situation with a clear mind and a sense of inner strength, you increase the chances of meaningful communication and, over time, a restored relationship. Dignity is not something others can take from you. It is something you carry within yourself. And in the end, calm reflection will always bring more clarity, wisdom, and peace than anger ever will. If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, Please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Insight number 2. Rebuild your own life. One of the most powerful things you can do when you feel ignored or overlooked by your children is to shift your focus back to yourself. Instead of dwelling on the pain of their absence, waiting for their calls, or seeking their validation, take this as an opportunity to rediscover yourself. Life does not end when your children grow up and move on with their own lives. It transforms, offering you a new chapter, one that you have full control over. It's easy to fall into the trap of longing for the past, reminiscing about the days when your children depended on you for everything. But instead of staying stuck in that place, redirect that energy toward rebuilding your own life. Find a purpose that excites you, one that fills your days with meaning. When you engage in activities that bring you joy, your energy shifts. And that shift does not go unnoticed. A parent who radiates joy, confidence, and independence becomes much harder to ignore. Take the story of Mrs. Elena, a widow in her late 60s. After losing her husband, she felt the weight of loneliness settle in. At first, her children checked in regularly, but as time went on, their visits became less frequent, their calls shorter, and eventually, they stopped altogether. At first, she was heartbroken. She would sit by the phone, hoping it would ring, scrolling through old messages just to feel connected to them. The silence was unbearable, and it made her question her worth. But one morning, something inside her shifted. She realized that waiting for others to bring her happiness was only making her more miserable. She needed to take control of her own life. That day, she opened a dusty packet of seeds from her kitchen cupboard and stepped outside to her neglected garden. She planted a few flowers and vegetables, unsure of where this small step would lead. But as days turned into weeks, gardening became more than just a hobby, it became her passion. She started waking up with excitement, eager to see the progress of her plants. She joined a local gardening club, met wonderful people who shared her interests, and even started exchanging vegetables with her neighbors. She found herself laughing more, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment she hadn't felt in years. Her world expanded, and with it, her energy changed. Then, one evening, her phone rang. It was her daughter. "Mom, I've been thinking about you lately. You sound so happy these days. What's your secret?" That single phone call opened the door to longer conversations, more visits, and a rekindled relationship. Her children, once distant, started seeing her in a new light, not as a lonely mother waiting for them to return, but as a woman who was thriving, independent, and full of life. The key lesson here is simple. A fulfilled parent is harder to ignore. When your life is filled with purpose and joy, people, including your children, are naturally drawn to you. Instead of waiting for them to make you feel valued, start investing in yourself. Explore new hobbies, reconnect with old passions, join a club, take a class, or volunteer in your community. Do things that bring you happiness. Not for anyone else, but for yourself. In doing so, you'll not only find peace and fulfillment, but you may also find that the very people you once longed for will be drawn back to you. When you are truly happy, your presence becomes magnetic. And in the process of rebuilding your own life, you might just rebuild your connection with your children as well. Insight number 3. Communicate your feelings wisely. When your children seem distant or even a little disrespectful, it's natural to feel hurt, frustrated, or even abandoned. The temptation to express your disappointment with sharp words can be strong. You might feel like saying, "Why don't you ever call me? Don't you care about me anymore?" These words, though honest in their pain, often create more distance rather than bringing loved ones closer. A defensive reaction can turn what could have been a meaningful conversation into an argument or deeper silence. The key is to communicate your feelings in a way that fosters connection rather than conflict. Expressing yourself with patience, understanding, and warmth will always be more effective than guilt or blame. This doesn't mean you should suppress your emotions or pretend everything is fine when it's not. Rather, it means finding a way to convey your feelings in a way that invites open-hearted responses instead of resistance. Consider the story of Mr. Peterson, a retired carpenter who spent years raising his son, James, with love and dedication. As James grew older, life became busier, work, family, responsibilities, and without realizing it, he started calling and visiting less and less. Months passed, and Mr. Peterson found himself sitting alone by the window, staring at the driveway, hoping to see his son's car pull in. The silence was painful, and resentment started creeping into his heart. He wanted to pick up the phone and demand, "Why have you forgotten about me?" But deep down, he knew that anger would only push James further away. Instead, Mr. Peterson chose a different approach. He sat down at his worn kitchen table, took out a piece of paper, and wrote his son a heartfelt letter. He didn't accuse or guilt-trip. He simply shared his feelings with honesty and warmth. "James, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I miss our conversations. I miss hearing about your life, your work, and the things that make you happy. I want you to know that no matter how busy life gets, I'm always here for you, and I will always be proud of you." A few days later, his phone rang. It was James. His father's words had touched him in a way he hadn't expected. He realized that his father's silence wasn't indifference. It was quiet longing. James admitted that between work and raising his children, he had let too much time pass without calling. That single letter became a turning point. From that day on, James made it a priority to check in with his father, to call him regularly, and to visit him on weekends. What had once felt like an emotional gap between them turned into a renewed bond. The lesson here is simple but powerful. Communicate wisely. If you want to rebuild or strengthen a connection with your children, let your words be a bridge, not a barrier. Instead of saying, "You never call me," try saying, "I miss hearing your voice," or "I've been thinking about you." Words have incredible power. They can either heal or wound. When you choose them with love and care, you create an atmosphere of understanding, openness, and connection. If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Insight number 4. Set healthy boundaries. Respect is a two-way street. As much as you want your children to respect you, you must also respect yourself by setting firm but loving boundaries. Boundaries are not walls that push people away. Rather, they serve as guidelines that teach others how to treat you. When you allow disrespect or inconsiderate behavior to continue unchecked, it sends an unspoken message that you are willing to tolerate being undervalued. However, when you establish clear limits, you not only protect your peace of mind but also set a powerful example for those around you. Consider the story of Mrs. Rosa, a retired nurse in her 70s. She had always been a devoted mother, putting her children's needs ahead of her own, even long after they had grown up and started families of their own. Her son, Daniel, had become increasingly demanding over the years. He rarely visited unless he needed something: money, help with his children, or simply a listening ear to vent his frustrations. Mrs. Rosa, wanting to feel needed and appreciated, would always drop everything to accommodate him. She believed that if she was always there for him, he would eventually reciprocate with gratitude and respect. But instead, Daniel's demands grew more unreasonable. He would show up unannounced, expecting her to babysit for hours without even asking in advance. When she did help, there was no acknowledgement, no gratitude, just an assumption that she would always be available. Over time, this began to take an emotional toll on her. She felt exhausted, unappreciated, and even a little resentful. She realized that, despite her love for her son, she was allowing herself to be treated as an afterthought rather than a respected individual with her own needs and desires. Then, one day, after yet another last-minute request, something inside her shifted. Instead of automatically saying yes, Mrs. Rosa took a deep breath and gently but firmly responded, "Daniel, I love you, but I'm not available today. I've made plans for myself." At first, Daniel was caught off guard. He was surprised, even a little annoyed. He had grown so accustomed to his mother always being there that the idea of her prioritizing herself felt foreign to him. But Mrs. Rosa stayed consistent. She stopped dropping everything for him at a moment's notice. She started valuing her own time and energy. Instead of waiting around for his calls, she began investing in herself, joining a local book club, attending yoga classes, and reconnecting with old friends she had neglected for years. At first, Daniel pulled away. He assumed she was just being difficult and that she would eventually return to her old ways. But as time went on, he started to notice the change in her. She seemed happier, more confident, and more at peace. He realized that his mother was no longer bending over backward to accommodate his every need, and that made him reflect on his behavior. Slowly, he began to adjust. He started showing more consideration, asking before making requests, and even taking the time to check in on her. Not because he needed something, but simply because he cared. By setting boundaries, Mrs. Rosa not only regained her dignity but also reshaped her relationship with her son for the better. She learned that saying no didn't mean she loved him any less. It simply meant she loved herself enough to prioritize her well-being. And in doing so, she taught Daniel an invaluable lesson. True respect must be mutual. The key takeaway is this: respect starts with you. You deserve to be treated with kindness, appreciation, and consideration, but that begins with how you treat yourself. Setting healthy boundaries is not an act of rejection, it is an act of self-respect. When you value your time, energy, and emotional health, others will learn to do the same. And in the end, by respecting yourself, you invite deeper, healthier, and more fulfilling relationships into your life. Insight number 5. Lead by example. It's natural to desire respect from others, especially from our children. But true respect isn't something that can be demanded or forced, it must be earned. And more often than not, it's earned through our actions, not our words. If we want our children to show us respect, the most effective way to teach them is by demonstrating it ourselves. Every day, in the way we speak, behave, and interact with others, including our children, we set the tone for how we expect to be treated in return. When we lead by example, we quietly teach the people around us what respect, kindness, and patience look like in practice. Our actions become a model that others, especially our children, unconsciously absorb and reflect over time. Consider the story of Mr. Lorenzo, a retired factory worker and a devoted grandfather of 5. Throughout his life, he had worked hard to provide for his family, believing that love and respect were best shown through sacrifice and dedication. But as he grew older, he noticed a painful shift. His adult children visited less frequently, and when they did, they seemed distracted, barely present. Their conversations were rushed, their eyes often fixed on their phones, and their visits grew shorter with each passing month. It hurt him deeply. At first, he was tempted to confront them, to express his disappointment, maybe even guilt-trip them into spending more time with him. But deep down, he knew that resentment would only drive them further away. Instead, Mr. Lorenzo made a conscious decision to continue treating his children with love, kindness, and respect, even when it felt like they weren't returning it. Every time they visited, he greeted them warmly, as if no time had passed. "It's so good to see you," he'd say, his eyes lighting up with genuine happiness. He never mentioned their long absences or criticized their lack of attention. Instead, he asked about their lives, listened intently, and responded with encouragement and wisdom. Even when they forgot his birthday one year, a moment that could have filled him with bitterness, he chose to respond with grace. Rather than expressing hurt, he simply sent them a heartfelt message. "I hope you're all doing well. I miss you." Slowly, something remarkable happened. His children began to notice his unwavering patience, his quiet dignity, and his ability to love without conditions. The guilt of their neglect turned into appreciation. They started making more of an effort, calling more frequently, staying longer during visits, and even bringing their children to spend time with their grandfather. They realized that the respect and kindness he had always shown them were something they wanted to reciprocate. The key lesson here is that respect is contagious. When we treat others, especially our children, with patience and dignity, we plant a seed. That seed may take time to grow, but eventually, it will take root. Instead of demanding respect, embody it in your actions. Show kindness, even when it's not immediately returned. Model the type of behavior you wish to receive. Over time, those around you, especially your children, will begin to reflect that same respect to you. The best way to teach is not through words, but through consistent, loving actions. If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, please comment number 3 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Insight number 6. Stay financially independent. As you grow older, one of the most effective ways to maintain your dignity and the respect of your children is by staying financially independent. Many parents assume that their children will naturally step in to take care of them as they age, believing that providing financial support is simply part of the family bond. However, while love and care should always be present, relying entirely on your children for financial stability can lead to unintended consequences. It may create stress, strain relationships, and even lead to feelings of resentment over time. Financial dependence can sometimes blur the lines between love and obligation, making interactions feel transactional rather than heartfelt. On the other hand, financial independence commands a different kind of respect. It sends a powerful message to your children that you have taken responsibility for your well-being and that you are not placing the burden of your future on their shoulders. When your children see that you are capable of managing your affairs, planning for your expenses, and making wise financial decisions, they are more likely to admire you as a role model rather than view you as someone they must take care of out of duty. They will see you as strong, self-sufficient, and forward-thinking, qualities that foster deeper respect and appreciation. Take the story of Mr. and Mrs. Carter, a retired couple in their 70s. As they approached retirement, they made a conscious decision to downsize their home, recognizing that maintaining a large property would be both costly and physically demanding. They simplified their lifestyle, cutting unnecessary expenses and ensuring that they could comfortably sustain themselves on their retirement savings. They carefully managed their finances, adhering to a strict budget and avoiding unnecessary debt. They also took the time to plan for potential medical expenses and other unforeseen costs, ensuring that they would not have to rely on their children for financial help in the future. At first, their children didn't fully understand the extent of their parents' planning. They assumed that, like many aging parents, their mother and father would eventually need to ask for financial assistance. But as time passed, they began to notice something remarkable. Mr. and Mrs. Carter never once asked for money, never expressed financial distress, and always seemed to be in control of their situation. They lived comfortably within their means, made thoughtful decisions about their spending, and never became a source of financial worry for their children. As the years went by, something interesting happened. Their children, now adults managing their careers and families, started seeking financial advice from their parents. They admired their discipline and the way they had structured their retirement to remain independent. They asked for budgeting tips, investment recommendations, and insights on how to plan for their futures. The respect their children had for them grew, not because of demands or expectations, but because of the example Mr. and Mrs. Carter set by taking full responsibility for their own lives. The key lesson here is clear. Financial independence is not just about money. It's about preserving your dignity, maintaining your autonomy, and setting a powerful example for future generations. It demonstrates that you are capable of making wise decisions and that you value your well-being enough to plan. This doesn't mean you should refuse help if you truly need it, but it does mean making an effort to handle your affairs as much as possible. When your children see that you have taken charge of your own life, they will respect you for it. They will offer their love and support willingly, without feeling pressured or burdened. Ultimately, by staying financially independent, you strengthen not only your sense of self-worth but also the foundation of your family's relationships, built on admiration, not obligation. Insight number 7. Forgive but don't forget your worth. When your children hurt you by ignoring or disrespecting you, forgiveness can be one of the hardest yet most powerful things you can offer. It's natural to feel pain when those you've loved and nurtured seem to overlook your presence or take you for granted. As a parent, you may have sacrificed so much, giving them unconditional love, support, and guidance, only to feel invisible in return. The sting of being unappreciated or disregarded can weigh heavily on your heart. But carrying resentment only burdens your soul, anchoring you to pain and preventing you from moving forward. Forgiveness, in contrast, frees you. It allows you to release the bitterness and reclaim your peace. However, forgiveness does not mean diminishing your value. You can forgive without excusing continued mistreatment. You can let go of anger without letting go of your self-respect. True forgiveness is about setting yourself free while maintaining your dignity and worth. Let me share the story of Mrs. Evelyn, a retired artist and devoted mother of 2. Throughout her life, she had poured her heart into raising her children, always being there when they needed her. But as time passed, her daughter Claire became distant, barely calling, rarely visiting, and often seeming preoccupied when they did speak. Evelyn found herself waiting by the phone, hoping for a message or an invitation that never came. The silence felt like an unbearable weight on her heart, leaving her questioning her place in her daughter's life. For years, Evelyn wrestled with feelings of sadness and rejection. She asked herself if she had done something wrong and if she had failed as a mother. The loneliness crept in, making her doubt her worth. She longed to reach out but feared pushing Claire further away. One evening, after staring at an old, dust-covered canvas in her study, Evelyn had a realization. She had spent so much time waiting for her daughter's love and attention that she had neglected her joy. She made a quiet yet powerful decision. It was time to reclaim her sense of self. Instead of dwelling on the hurt, she wrote Claire a heartfelt letter. In it, she expressed her love and forgiveness, letting go of resentment without expecting anything in return. She ended with, "I forgive you for the distance between us, and I will always love you. But I have also realized that my happiness cannot depend on things beyond my control. I hope to hear from you, but in the meantime, I will be living fully." And that's exactly what she did. Evelyn dusted off her paintbrushes and rediscovered the artist within her. She joined a local art group, met new friends, and even exhibited her paintings at community events. She no longer defined her happiness by whether or not her daughter reached out. Instead, she chose to embrace the beauty in life, to immerse herself in the passions that had once made her feel alive. Months later, Claire showed up unexpectedly. The woman who had once seemed too busy now stood in Evelyn's doorway, looking around at the vibrant paintings filling the room. "Mom, you've been painting again? Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, a mixture of admiration and guilt in her voice. Evelyn simply smiled and said, "I've been focusing on what brings me joy." That visit marked a turning point in their relationship. Claire began calling and visiting more often, not out of guilt but out of a newfound respect for her mother's quiet strength and independence. She realized that her mother's world did not revolve around her, and that made her appreciate Evelyn even more. The key lesson here is this: forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. It is an act of love, a release from pain, but it does not require you to shrink yourself or accept less than you deserve. You are worthy of respect, kindness, and appreciation, no matter what. Never allow anyone's neglect or mistreatment to define your worth. Pursue your passions, live with dignity, and remember this simple truth: your value is not measured by how others treat you, it comes from within. If you are still watching this video and finding these lessons useful, please comment number 4 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Insight number 8. Build a new circle of companionship. Loneliness can be one of the most painful and unexpected consequences of aging, especially when you feel ignored, unappreciated, or disrespected by your children. As they grow older and become engrossed in their own responsibilities, careers, families, and personal pursuits, you may notice a gradual shift in their priorities. The calls become less frequent, the visits shorter, and the deep, meaningful conversations you once cherished seem to dwindle. If you're not careful, this emotional void can become overwhelming, leading you to depend entirely on your children for companionship and support. You might find yourself waiting by the phone, longing for an invitation, or feeling disappointed when their lives move forward without you at the center. This kind of emotional dependence, however, can be a heavy burden for both you and your children. When you rely solely on them to fulfill your need for connection, any unreturned call, missed visit, or perceived neglect can feel deeply personal. It may lead to feelings of frustration, sadness, or even resentment. But the truth is, while your children still love you, their lives have expanded, and it's natural for their focus to shift. That's why it's crucial to take control of your emotional well-being by building a new circle of companionship, one that is not solely dependent on your children. Consider the story of Mr. Harold, a retired widower in his early 80s. For years, he placed all his emotional investment in his son and daughter, believing that family should always be his primary source of companionship. He waited eagerly for their visits, treasured every phone call, and hoped they would always be there to fill the silence in his home. But as time passed, their responsibilities grew. His daughter moved to another city for work, and his son, caught up in raising young children, had little time to spare. The visits that once felt warm and full of life became sporadic, and soon, Harold found himself alone more often than not. His days became repetitive, waking up to silence, eating meals alone, and watching the hours slip away without meaningful human interaction. One day, after a particularly lonely week, Harold made a decision that changed everything. He noticed a flyer for a local seniors club and, with some hesitation, decided to attend. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he felt a small spark of hope. To his surprise, he was warmly welcomed. He met other people who, like him, had once felt the sting of isolation but had found new ways to create companionship. There was a weekly coffee gathering at the clubhouse, a book club that met every month, and even a group that took morning walks in the nearby park. Encouraged by their kindness, Harold slowly began to engage. At first, it felt unfamiliar, but soon, he found himself looking forward to these gatherings. He met a group of like-minded individuals with whom he could share stories, laughter, and meaningful conversations. He even joined a travel group that took day trips to nearby towns. Before long, Harold's life felt richer and more fulfilling. While he still loved his children dearly and missed their presence, he no longer felt that overwhelming emptiness when they were busy. Instead of waiting for their attention, he filled his days with friendships, hobbies, and activities that brought him genuine joy. The key lesson here is simple yet powerful. Loneliness often leads to emotional dependence, but proactively building a vibrant social life can help fill the void. By expanding your circle of companionship, you give yourself the gift of connection, one that isn't solely reliant on your children's availability. This shift not only enhances your emotional well-being but also relieves any unspoken pressure on your children, allowing your relationship with them to evolve in a healthier and more balanced way. Surround yourself with people who uplift and support you. Seek out community groups, reconnect with old friends, or explore new interests that bring you closer to like-minded individuals. The more you invest in building meaningful relationships outside of your family, the more fulfilled and content you will feel. In doing so, you reclaim your sense of joy, independence, and purpose, proving that companionship and connection can be found in many beautiful places, not just within your immediate family. As we come to the end of this message, take a moment to reflect on what stood out to you the most. What lesson spoke to your heart? How has this message encouraged, inspired, or challenged you? We all go through different seasons in life, and sometimes, a simple realization can shift our perspective and bring us closer to God's wisdom and love. So, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. What is one key lesson you've learned today? How will you apply it in your daily life moving forward? Your insights might inspire and uplift someone else who needs encouragement today. Let's create a space where we can learn, grow, and support each other in faith. If this message has blessed you, please take a moment to leave a comment, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps spread God's love and encouragement to more people around the world. Stay blessed, and remember, God is always with you.